When it comes to advice and life lessons, we tend to think they need to come from sources that would be considered intellectual. Mentors, books, poets, psychologists, sources that are known for being deep and introspective. But this isn't always the case. I'm a firm believer that the answers to some of life's biggest questions can be easily found all around us. In fact, sometimes the things we consume purely for entertainment purposes end up having some of the biggest lessons and best advice on life. But in order to recognize them, you have to be open to the idea that absolutely anything can be a learning opportunity. It doesn't even have to be actual advice or even direct teaching from a person. My philosophy on advice is actually more akin to that of Nipsey Hussle's.
I steal advice. You ain't even got to tell me. I steal it. Whether you said it in the interview,
right?
Or you just done some bullshit that I could peep game in your demonstration.
So this week, I wanted to share 3 of the deepest life lessons I've received from what I would call unlikely sources. Okay, for our first lesson, we're jumping into the Boondocks. If you're not familiar with the show, it's essentially an anime-inspired American cartoon starring a black family composed of a grandfather, simply called Granddad, and his 2 grandsons, Huey and Riley. The show was known for using parody and satire to reflect American culture in a comedic and often controversial manner. It actually tackled a lot of social issues, but its main function was to be funny. That said, one of its most famous lines is actually not comedic at all. In Season 2, Episode 14, 10-year-old Huey Freeman stages a strike to protest corruption in his community. Unfortunately, the media and the community quickly see the potential upside of the protest and begin exploiting it for their benefit. At the end of the episode, Huey, who was obviously distraught by the situation, turns to his granddad for advice, and this is the conversation that ensues.
Granddad, what do you do when you can't do nothing, but there's nothing you can do?
You do what you can.
Now, I've seen many comments online argue that this doesn't make any sense because Huey literally says, "There's nothing you can do," but let me explain my perspective. Huey doesn't mean nothing in the literal sense. What he means is that sometimes in life, you feel powerless to make any meaningful and lasting change. It's very difficult for a single person to restructure an entire system or way of living. It can make us feel hopeless, useless even, like there is quite literally no action we can take, and even if there were, it'd be futile. But Granddad's advice gets at the crux of this whole thing because, from his point of view, there is always something you can do. Even if that something is merely to state your point, even if that something doesn't directly change anything, even if that something appears to have been pointless at face value. The important thing is to try. You just have to do whatever is within your power to do. Because who knows, maybe your actions will end up leading to change later on. Maybe they will inspire people who will make change. You do what you can is simply a hopeful reminder that no matter how dire a situation may feel, it's never fully over or completely hopeless unless you give up on it. Okay, for the second life lesson, we're actually going to be looking at another American cartoon. This one being Rick and Morty.
Ricky Morty, Ricky Morty, Ricky Morty.
Full disclosure, I've never actually seen this show. I just know it's about a genius but highly unstable scientist named Rick and his grandson Morty who get up to crazy antics across dimensions or something like that. I'm not even sure if the show follows a linear storyline or if it's just standalone episodes, but what I do know is that a while back, I was scrolling on Instagram when I came across a quote that kinda shook my whole world.
Your boos mean nothing. I've seen what makes you cheer.
Your boos mean nothing to me. I've seen what makes you cheer. Let's unpack this life lesson because there's kind of a lot going on here. Basically, what's going on in this scene is there's sort of a motivational speech for criminals going on. But in Rick's opinion, the content of the speech is cliche and formulaic, much like the popular social media content that's out there nowadays. Anyway, as Rick enters the room, he critiques this, which leads to the booing and hence his line. And that single line kind of describes exactly how the world works. People will not always like you or what you do. You may never find yourself in a position where you can literally get booed, but people will inevitably hate on you and talk down on what you do, especially when you're starting to make a name for yourself. But here's the thing. The things people glorify, the things they praise, the things they cheer for are often recycled, meaningless, and have no heart. If those are the things they like, the things they enjoy, why does it matter if they don't like what you're doing? Their hate should mean nothing to you. Let me use myself as an example here because I make YouTube videos. I'm operating in a space where I can't audibly be booed, but people can definitely talk shit and boo me in the comments. But here's the thing. What do people watch these days? What's popular? Red pill content, skibbity toilets, only models conducting so-called interviews on the street. If this is what people cheer for, if this is what gets them excited to hop on social media, why would I care if they boo my content? Anyway, I honestly never really expected to hear a line like this in a cartoon, especially one that I've never actually sat down and watched, and yet, here we are. Wild. All right, we're gonna switch gears for the third life lesson. Mac Miller, 2009. In that song, Mac Miller opens verse 1 with a very simple line. He says,
Okay, you gotta jump in to swim.
if you take the line literally, it sounds kind of dumb. Like, yeah, you have to be in the water, you have to jump in if you want to swim. Duh. But that's not what he's talking about. To really understand the line, you have to look at the album as a whole, paying close attention to its title, Swimming. The word swimming here doesn't refer to the act of using your limbs to propel yourself through water. It's meant more in the sense that Dory uses it in Finding Nemo when she says, just keep swimming. She's talking about pressing on, moving forward, not giving up in the face of challenges. And that's precisely what Mac Miller was doing with this entire album, pressing on. He'd long been open about his struggles with mental health and drug addiction, but he wasn't letting that stop him. He was determined to keep moving forward. But what about the jump in part? Well, when it comes to chasing our dreams and going after the things we want, we're often scared to start because A, we don't know where to start, or B, we're afraid that we'll fail. But Mac's whole point is that in order to get to a point where you can even move towards the goal, you have to be willing to jump in, to dive into the deep end, even if you're unsure of where it'll lead or how you'll get there. Then, and only then, you can carry on through all the struggles because, frankly, they're unavoidable. Honestly, I may be reading too deep into the line, although I don't think so, but if that's not a hell of a life lesson, then I don't know what is. Also, I noticed that these lessons were going to be from unlikely sources, but I don't actually consider rap to be an unlikely source. In fact, in many ways, I see rappers as modern day philosophers. I think breaking down some of these rappers' philosophies in a video would actually be really interesting, so if that sounds like something you'd want to watch, please let me know down in the comments. But for now, thank you for watching, subscribe for weekly videos, and I'll catch you in the next one.